Welcome to SportsBeat KC, the sports podcast of the Kansas City Star and KCUR. It's Tuesday, July 7th, and I'm Blair Kerkhoff. The United States national team's run in the FIFA World Cup is over with a thud. A 4-1 loss to Belgium on Monday sparked plenty of commentary on the state of U.S. soccer, and we'll join in the conversation on today's episode with Star columnist Vahe Gregorian. What does this flat effort say about us as a soccer nation, and how should we react to the dispiriting loss? This was supposed to be the year of the breakthrough, when the U.S. could play with maybe not the game's upper echelon, but maybe at the next level. But that didn't happen Monday. The U.S. simply was outclassed. Where do we go from here? After a break, I'll share with you what's on my radar in Kansas City sports this week. Hello, Vahe.
Hi, Blair.
It's good to see you. And it occurred to me that in the last 24 hours, we have witnessed a couple of blowouts in sporting events, one in person, and one we watched on television last night. We're going to spend most of the time discussing the one we watched, the U.S. national team really flatlining against Belgium 4-1. What a disappointing outcome that was.
It was, and you wanted to be, there's so many complications to it, right? You wanted to be fired up for this potentially at least semi-historic moment for them. This sense of the program maybe arriving, and then you got all the political stuff hovering over it, kind of, I dare say, contaminating it. A good number of my friends, I will say, Blair, felt misgivings about even how full-throatedly they wanted to root for the U.S. in this because of the implications of the meddling of the president.
We'll get to that in a second. We'll need to touch on that. I watched it at home with Karen, and our son Nate is in town. He went to a downtown watch party, and last night after the game, he made a good point. He said he thought the game could have gone one of three ways: a U.S. victory, in which if that had happened, I think the politics that were played the previous 48 hours would be a huge story today. Or it could have been a close U.S. loss, in which case, competitive loss, in which case we'd have all been disappointed. U.S. fans would have been disappointed, and it would have been a little easier to accept. Or they could have gotten blown out, and we're all kind of angry with our sadness, with not only with the political ramifications of it, but just the state of what it says about the state of U.S. soccer. So, do you get that sense that even in the blowout loss, we should share some of our feelings about the events of the previous day and a half, when President Trump got involved in a way that left us all shaking our heads?
I think this, Blair, I feel like it's all entwined, and I think Nate was correct and you're correct. Did you use Nate's name before?
Yes.
Okay.
He's out there.
Nate and Karen, welcome to the podcast. But I do think it would have, the apex of the controversy would have been if the U.S. won.
I think it would have been full blown.
Right.
Today.
It would have been
the world.
The only story.
It would have been the U.S. against the world, right? Because the world would have been furious.
Yeah.
And they were furious before the game. If the U.S. had won, my gosh.
And I do think that I had intended to try to write something about it yesterday, and it just couldn't wrap it together in time. And I sort of thought, just because the game went the way it did doesn't absolve the situation, right? Doesn't mean it still didn't merit comment, because of just for big picture sake, just for the statement about meddling versus sportsmanship versus process, all these things. So I didn't want to assume that storyline is no longer valid. It's just different than it would have been in the light of a U.S. win. And that was, to me, that was part of the problem, right? It was no win for Team USA, because there was going to be a stigma, an asterisk, whatever you want to call it, not from its doing at all. And that's
Right.
that's the part that to me was just so hard to swallow. And yeah,
Well, we thought it was possible that, and as I mentioned at the top, you and I were witness to a couple of blowouts. The other one was at the Royals game, where the Royals, a game in which they historically beat the Philadelphia Phillies 15-1. We'll touch on that in a little while. But we had suggested that it's possible that Flo Balogun, the player who was the beneficiary of the decision that FIFA made with a little bit of political pressure, it now appears, from President Trump, who took credit for
yeah.
Flo Balogun's eligibility for the game, that he might not play. And wouldn't that be a statement that the U.S. could make, that don't even play Flo Balogun in this game?
I think it's a powerful thought, and in something I was working on today, I wrote about that would have been really inspiring to see that statement made. But I also took note of this, and maybe this is too strong a term, but that didn't keep me from using it in what I wrote, that the struggle for the U.S., the dilemma is that it also has a moral imperative to try to win, right? It's for team, for country, to try to win. And if your best player is available through apparently unscrupulous methods, but nonetheless available, FIFA sanctioned, then what's the higher calling? And I don't really have an answer to that, but I will say I would have relished watching the game in a certain different way if everybody just said, you know what, it may cost us, but we're not going to play him. And that's probably naive and maybe even just wrong. I could see a case where that's just wrong thinking, but it would have been an inspired gesture.
It would have come from a good place.
It would have. It would have said, you know, we think we don't want to win by any means.
Well,
we want to win above reproach.
And we respect the rules.
And we respect the rules as they've been in 187 out of 188 other instances in World Cup play, and not since 1962.
But he played, and the U.S. looked terrible in the loss.
And Blair, you said this in comments we had back and forth with each other. You felt like Belgium was just on another tier, and maybe the emotional mumbo jumbo I'm talking about. You didn't say this to me; it doesn't matter. But I mean, maybe it's as simple as that.
I guess I heard a lot of discussion pregame show and other outlets about how this would affect the U.S. And to be honest, I thought it had more of a chance to inspire Belgium than it did to motivate the U.S. And maybe Belgium was inspired by it. I don't know. The way that the United States played and the way they came out, it was so flat. And Belgium had a goal in 9 minutes, and the U.S. looked lost and kind of bewildered in this game. It was hard to describe how poorly they played.
Well, listen, and that's what leaves me having this sort of uneasy feeling about. I joke all the time about wanting to see the parallel universe where this went differently, because as much as Belgium just looked superior, you know, a couple of these goals were blatant mistakes.
And the third goal was horrible.
Yes, third goal was horrible. And then one of the goals, now I can't remember which one, it really was, as the old Roy Williams term used to be, it looked like it was just about want to in the right position. Now, I don't know if that makes if that signifies one team being not quite, emotionally on its game and the other being fired up. I don't know. But it doesn't take a great leap to think that either.
No. Star columnist Vahe Gregorian is here. I'm Blair Kerkhoff. We're talking about Team USA and their big loss, eliminating loss to Belgium in the FIFA World Cup. So the U.S. gets as far as it has typically gotten in World Cup, a round of 16, although there was an added layer this year, the first year of the 48-team tournament, so they won a round of 32 game over Bosnia-Herzegovina, and this was going to be the test. Obviously, Belgium was the best team that they had faced of the five. They were the fifth team. They were the best. This was going to be an opponent that would challenge the U.S. in a way the others hadn't. And if the U.S. had won and reached the quarterfinals, would have been the first time since 2002. It would have proven something about U.S. soccer, that it had made progress, and not only did they not make not only did the outcome prove they haven't made progress, but the last time they played Belgium in a round of 16 game, that was in 2014 at the Brazil World Cup, and it was a gut-wrenching 1-0 loss, a game in which Tim Howard had the magnificent game goal, the Matt Beasler and Graham Zusi team of the U.S. So 12 years later, playing the same opponent and losing horribly, what does that say about U.S. soccer progress?
Well, this is an interesting thing too, right? Because we're going to base it all entirely on that match, and it's deservedly so. But I wonder if it had been around earlier, if it hadn't been if that was a 32 team tournament, not 48, and they'd gotten here, and I'm convoluting the numbers, but it's just interesting to me to picture all the difference that one match could make, I guess, in the end, right? I think we talked before the start of it. U.S. gets to a quarterfinal. I think you can kind of feel like, okay, this is
they've taken the next
mark.
step.
And I think you're right to say it's somewhere between stagnation and regression. It's just now, interestingly, about 2002, right? That was 8 years after the World Cup was here. I haven't done the research on this, but I suppose you'd be able to draw a connection between having it here and a bump. And I think a lot of people are going to want to think that 2026 is going to core itself into more and better immediate energy for soccer in our country. Whether that means future generations are going to see something more, it's hard to say. It really is.
I think one place where we'll be able to measure some progress is in viewership. I'm looking at a tweet right now from Fox Sports PR that says 30 million viewers watched the Belgium-U.S. game, most watched soccer telecast.
U.S. viewers, right?
Yes, U.S. viewers. Yeah, this isn't Telemundo, the additional, just Fox. So most watched soccer telecast in U.S. history. Audience peaked at 37 million at about 8:15 last night Central Time. So that's NFL playoff type numbers.
Yeah,
that's remarkable stuff. That's good. And there's no doubt that up until last night's game, the progress of the U.S. team was part of the story of what can only be described as the successful World Cup in North America. Attendance has been fantastic at all the games, and the television audiences have been humongous, and fan participation. And being in Kansas City, we get such a firsthand view of this. It's just been nothing but good vibes about this tournament for several weeks. And then the punch in the gut last night from Team USA is really the first time we felt this way.
Yeah, I think that's 100% right. It's a gut punch and also just this unsavory taste about it. Whereas before, everything really was, I don't know how you measure vibes per se, but everything you just brought up speaks to it. And certainly, I think you could say we've been at the epicenter of that here in Kansas City with so many things that just feel right and good and welcoming and energized. So that was, a tough day in the life of the World Cup for Team USA and the country itself, no doubt.
Okay, let's take a break. We're back on SportsBeat KC, the sports podcast of the Kansas City Star and KCUR, here with Star columnist Vahe Gregorian. And we're talking about Team USA's loss to Belgium in the round of 16 in Seattle on Monday night, and if the game had a play to describe the failure of the U.S., and we mentioned it earlier, it was the third goal by Belgium, in which the goalkeeper Matt Freese just mishit or didn't even. I don't think he made contact with the ball. He, just a bad play. He was what 30 yards from the goal.
He was so caught up field.
Yeah,
up pitch, I should say.
Pitch, and Belgium snuck a goal in behind him. But if the U.S. had a face or a player to identify its misfortune last night, it has to be Christian Pulisic, who really has been the Captain America, face of U.S. soccer. Just a poor game by him, and not a great World Cup tournament for him so far. And he, for better or for worse, he's been a symbol for U.S. soccer. And ever since North America was awarded the World Cup, 8 years ago, people then were pointing to a young Christian Pulisic will be leading U.S. to great things when the World Cup gets here. I felt badly for him last night, and I think this likely ends his role as being a leader for this team. Yeah,
and look, it was too bad that it sort of amplified by the injury when he comes off, and I don't know that they were getting back in that game. I can't remember how much time was left when he went out, but it was a good chunk, and it was still maybe it was 3-1 by then.
I think that's right.
But it is too bad. We have through history, you have athletes who are dominant in their sports for a while and then kind of never get to taste the grand success of the team success. And I think you're right. How old is he now?
I think he's 31.
Yeah, 31. So, maybe he's got a Messi like,
at least one more World Cup.
Reset in him. Maybe not. But to your point, U.S. soil, it was the real synergy opportunity.
For sure. I was thinking about that last night. For him for the U.S. to go out in a loss like this in the tournament on home court, and of course they're not the only hosts of the tri-host nations to lose. What a little collection over the last few days of Mexico's heartbreaking loss in Mexico City, England, and Canada losing, getting eliminated from the tournament. Not even in Canada, they lost that opportunity when I think it was Switzerland that beat them in Vancouver. Yeah. So. The hosts all got out of the group play, but then couldn't get in much farther than that. So there it is. I don't know where U.S. soccer goes from here. People who are more conversant in the sport will have to tell me that there either is or isn't a bright future, that the developmental level of the sport of this country is doing what it should be doing. Is it producing the young talent that it needs? I thought you made a very nice point. In 94, when the U.S. last hosted the World Cup, the MLS came out of that.
Yeah.
And you could see the progress up through 2014 when USA played well and lost heartbreaker to Belgium. Let's see if this World Cup experience can, motivate or inspire another generation of young soccer talent, and the developmental level of soccer in the United States does what a developmental level, should do, right? Produce future stars.
Yeah, and look, that's a bit of a vague world to me too, in terms of understanding what's bubbling up. I don't really have a grasp of that, and you said it well when you said somebody more conversant than me on this would need to do that. But I think there's a lot of legacy questions that are going to come out of this World Cup. Some for us here in Kansas City specific, but this is sort of the looming one overall, right? What does it mean? What does it portend for the future of U.S. soccer?
Random thought here. I couldn't help but think watching Belgium and watching some of the top teams in the world, England playing as well as it's playing right now, and France, of course, is incredible. France may be the best. Spain, all of them. Argentina, by the way, just finished an incredible victory over Egypt, in which they scored 3 goals in a 13-minute span to overcome a 2-0 deficit to beat Egypt. So Argentina coming back to Arrowhead Stadium this weekend to play either Colombia or Switzerland. I wondered if Tyreek Hill, who may be one of the pound for pound the greatest athlete I've ever encountered on a as a sports writer, what he would have been like as a soccer player.
Especially with that equilibrium or low center of balance.
Yes.
And that speed.
I just go back to the couple of times that when the Chiefs had a length of the field touchdown run, and he started from 10 yards behind the play and ended up beating the running back to the end zone.
And then when space allowed, running through the end zone into the ramp at a couple stadiums, right? I mean, it just kept going.
You put a ball in front of him.
Remember this stat? I think he ran a 200. I don't know if it was Junior Olympics or some other USA competition. He ran the 200 in 2012, I believe, in a time that would have finished sixth in the London Olympics.
That's right. Crazy.
So, and then just like to your point, think of that build, the agility, the body control. I think if memory serves, we could see him just standing still doing a flip.
Yeah.
And all these kinds of things.
Yep. No, like I said, he's an incredible athlete. I just wondered what a soccer playing Tyreek Hill would have been like.
It's interesting to picture. I can't think of any other Chiefs, former or current, that I'd be so intrigued by. There's others, I'm sure. In fact, I'm sure like Harrison Butker played soccer.
Yep.
I love it.
Soccer player.
He's the athletic specimen that Tyreek Hill is.
Right. That was a random thought, but Tyreek Hill's still out there as a free agent, and makes you wonder if we could see him in a Chiefs uniform this year. Okay, let's wrap it up with this. As I mentioned a couple times, we watched the Royals beat the Philadelphia Phillies 15-1 on Monday afternoon. Wow. And yet it's an outcome that pushed the Royals' record to 17 under 500. With the All-Star break approaching, is it still a lost cause for the Royals?
It sure feels like it. And look, I was probably maybe the last person sort of foolish enough to say that you're telling me they have a chance. About 3-4 weeks ago when they won 6 out of 7, 6 out of 8, just reminded that you just don't always feel like you really have a grip on baseball. Baseball is very elusive that way. But its trends the pendulum starts to swing into a place where it settles into what it really is. And it's hard to think right now there's any capacity to get into a place where you're talking about the wild card. I haven't looked exactly, but I assume there's still like 13.5 out of the wild card, or at least double digits.
Yeah, I'm not sure. But I'm not sure. But the only thing I know is the entire American League is terrible. I mean,
that's it. And when that's your calling card, it's now. The thing is, Sam McDowell wrote a really interesting column about this the other day. Some of the X factors that the Royals really were depending on, lo and behold, have come to pass, right? Carter Jensen and Jack Caglione's development, pretty exciting, pretty good. But so many other things have not been what...
The veterans, mostly.
Yeah, the part about that's so disillusioning and curious and hard to process is it wasn't like people were just guessing these guys should continue to be what they were, right? I mean, I suppose you could always ask the question, when is Salvi going to start to diminish? And maybe we've seen that this year, but you ought to have been able to count on Vinny Pasquantino and Garcia to be the guys they seem to be becoming. Pitching, same thing, bedeviled by injuries, right, too.
Absolutely.
Slow start and then bedeviled by injuries.
I got to talk to Chris Bubich yesterday, and it didn't sound good.
Yeah.
Optimistic. 8.5, by the way, games behind in the wild card.
Look at that. They're right back in it.
You're saying there's a chance.
So look, here's the thing, right? And this is, I only bring this up because somebody emailed me about it. I used some line in what I wrote a month or so ago that isn't it more fun to wonder than assume? And I guess that's true. Now I wonder. What if they win, where they have 6 before the All-Star game?
Yep, 3 at the Mets, 3 at the Orioles.
So win 4 out of 6. And what if you're talking about somewhere between 5 and 8 games back of the wild card going in the All-Star break? That's kind of interesting.
Seems like they'd have to be at 500 or so, because right now the third wild card team is, let's see, 500. The Texas Rangers are 45-45, and they would be in the playoffs at 500.
Yeah. Well, look, and let me also just put an asterisk next to how ridiculous I'm being. Yesterday, when we were sitting there watching the game, I was looking at the game notes, and I was like, that's an interesting stat. Yesterday was the first time since June 22nd and June 23rd the Royals have won back-to-back games. So,
isn't it a crazy sport?
It is.
We try to find optimism in places that no other sport would a team be at playing 400, percentage, and you'd think, they got a shot.
Don't sleep on them.
Maybe that's just what it is when you have a team with Bobby Witt Jr., a starter in the All-Star game for the first time, and Carter Jensen and Jack Caglione. And you're right. There are some reasons to still wonder about this team.
Yeah.
I think the next conversation, though, that needs to be had is, are they sellers? And if so, what?
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think they, by all appearances, could, should, and will be. But I don't know. They're not really showing those cards either exactly yet.
We'll save that conversation for another show. Thank you, Vahe.
Thanks, Blair.
Here's what's on my radar in Kansas City sports this week. The nation's first college football media day is this week. The Big 12 coaches and top players are meeting in Frisco, Texas to discuss the upcoming season, and the crews from Kansas State and Kansas will address reporters on Wednesday. You'll hear from coaches Colin Klein of the Wildcats and KU's Lance Leipold. It's an interesting upcoming season for both programs, with expectations maybe reduced from recent years. The Stars Kellis Robinette and Shreyas Laddha, you've heard of both here on SportsBeat KC. Well, they'll have you covered from Texas. We mentioned the Royals a little earlier. A week from today is the All-Star game, this year in Philadelphia, for the nation's 250th birthday. Bobby Witt Jr., who, as of this recording, leads the American League in stolen bases and wins above replacement, will get the start at shortstop for the first time, even though he's been the league's best shortstop for the past 3 years. Also representing the Royals is starting pitcher Michael Wacha. To me, baseball still has the best all-star game of the major sports. It's the only one that approximates a regular season game in terms of effort, so always a fun watch. Well, that'll do it for this week. Thanks so much for listening. Shout out to our production staff, producers Gabriella Lacey and Suzanne Hogan, and to our editors Hannah Wise, Jeff Rosen, and Scott Chasen. Hey, look, if you're feeling it, leave us a review and a rating. Really appreciate that. We'll be back next week with another SportsBeat KC, where we talk sports in Kansas City.